All right. Welcome to our session today. I am so privileged to have Rhiannon with me, Rhiannon Thomas. And I don't want to give anything away. I want to I'll introduce her properly later. So, Rhiannon, but when I say I feel privileged, I really feel privileged to have you here. She is, I think, all the way from South Africa, then to the UK, and then back.
Yep.
After spending a lot of time in the UK. So it feels like we have imported her, but she is actually homebred. Can you say that? Does
Yeah,
that sound weird?
I'm lacquer and local.
Laka and local. But we are glad to have you back in South Africa, and I'm just super excited to share with you introduce what she's gonna share with you. Maybe I'm gonna just quickly jump to sharing my screen again, and just talk through a few things for those of you that is new to Zoom. Our only question is, where have you been the last couple of months? Um, I assume that most of us are very comfortable working in this kind of environment. But if you do have any questions, we have Tammy. You can't see her, but she is sitting behind the screens and she's on the technical side of things. So if you have any issues with sound or video, just go to the chat box and you can speak to her. Secondly, everything is muted, or I mean, all your mics are muted, and it's just simply there so that should a dog comes past or a bus or something, that there's not a lot of noise. It's not that we don't want to hear your voice. However, in this context, it's better to maybe use the chat box if you want to send a question or want to mention something. You're more than welcome to use that. And once again, Tammy will sit on the back end side and make sure that we don't miss anything that you are sharing with us. Um, Also, if you are thinking about questions for later on, maybe something pops up into your mind, just write it down, put it in the chat box, then we will not miss it and we will come back to those questions. Second last thing, recording. So we are recording this just to let you know. So maybe you become famous. So let me just let you know that we are recording this. And we will make the recording available after the session as well. So should load shedding cut you short, if it cuts us short, there's a problem. But should there be a load shedding issue, you will be able to get the video. In fact, we will send the recording to you. By the way, this is maybe a good time just to go to our YouTube channel and sign up and follow us. I don't know how all of those things work, and I don't really care. All I care about is giving you some cool content, and there's a lot of cool stuff on the Life Assurance Solutions YouTube channel. And then the last thing, our previous webinar was about self-management. And oh my word, we have the coolest people engaging on our self-management course. So much so that we said that we really want to give people a taste of it. So, Tanya, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, just to put the link into the chat box. And then all of you should go and click on the link and open it up in another window. And then after this session, go to the self-management page that we've created. Let me see if I can quickly get it for you. Tammy, you can see that, yeah? Go to that page, and if you scroll down, we have actually made our first lesson free. So we said, hey, just go to the page. You can review the introductions. You can actually go and do the whole first lesson. And we're not going to charge you anything for it. We really just want to share some cool knowledge, all right? If you do want to go further on in the course, you obviously just enroll, and then there's a cost available. We still need to pay back the people that help us create this. All right, so that is self-management, and that's all from me as an introduction. Now, if you're good to go, I want to jump in with something huge. And when I say huge, it's most likely it's the topic that's probably the closest to my heart. And maybe I can start off with this idea, this concept. And that is that in my business, where we engage with people often around training and changing and thinking and company culture, there's a big, I don't know what words to use. So fill in your own word, okay? So I'm just gonna let a word out, and then you make with it whatever you want to do. Our soul, our core, our spirit, our whatever you want to call that thing. You know that thing when you see yourself in the mirror and then you're actually talking to yourself and you're like, that thing inside of you really struggles to connect to concepts. Concepts doesn't really matter a lot to the core of who we are. I can tell you about going on a roller coaster ride and how cool it will be, But it's only when you experience the roller coaster ride, when you get into that little car seat and it starts vibrating and it goes up. I mean, I can tell you about the G forces and everything, but it's when you experience it that you really start connecting to it.
Yeah.
And so my journey over the last 12, geez, more, nearly 15 years, was really, how do we take concepts and then turn it into experiences for people? I mean, I can have the most beautiful company culture vision on the wall and the most beautiful values on the wall. It's beautiful, but it's just a concept while it's sitting on the wall. It's only when I experience that I will be able to connect with it. And so over the years, we've been on a mission as to how do we take these concepts and make people experience them. And so one of the things when I walk around within a company is I really trying to pick up on people's experiences, because that's where the truth would sit, that's where they're connected. And so I would get a call from a person and saying, CEO of a mega company, and they would say, Cobus, can we talk about company culture? And then I've got a little bit of my own little thing that I'm doing. On my way to his office, to the CEO's office, I stop with people and I just try to connect with them to see really where their hearts are. And one big question is, tell me about trust in this company. Just tell me about, do you trust your peers? Do you trust the people kind of below you reporting to you? Do you trust the people above you? Just tell me about trust. And often in that, I get such a grip, such a sense of where the company is and how the people engage. Trust becomes probably, trust is ultimately the glue of that will take your people and gel them and move them forward. You can actually go and have a look at how do we measure that, and you will see a direct correlation with people's engagement. So trust is a huge thing. And we really felt as a team that we want to talk to you guys about trust. Because what you need to understand is that as levels lift, and I'm so thankful that they lift. I said the other day, I'm people hungry, and you can't say that. That sounds cannibalistic. But I so wanted to spend time with people again. But as the levels lift, and we are expecting things to get better, you need to understand that how you are dealing with things right now, not when it's level 1 and 0, how you are dealing with things right now will have effect on your people's trust. Now, here comes a crazy statistic for you. If I break trust within an organization, and the research was done actually with retrenchments, it can take up to 5 years for people to regain their trust. We worked with an organization, a big citrus company exporting in South Africa. And the CEO shared with me that there was a time that they had to retrench people, and they've got a little hall, and they called everybody into the hall, and then they shared the news that there will be retrenchments. And he said, and when we had the discussion, I think it was about 3 years later, 4 years later, he said, Cobus, even when we want to do a team building exercise or a fun thing, we can't go back to that hall, because people don't want to go back to that hall. And this is 3 years after retrenchments. And so we think that, hey, we just need to think about the person that we are retrenching. You are sitting with a whole company that's still staying, and 5 years of trust that might be touched or affected by the way we do things. So we thought, let's get in an expert. This is still not the introduction. I'm still getting to that introduction. But let's get in an expert. And when I say expert, this is an expert on trust and making it tangible. Because remember, trust is just a concept. It's when we experience that it's really going to hit home, And so that's the journey. That's what we want to do. But let me just quickly give you the psychology. 5 minutes. Tammy, this is quick, okay? I just want to quickly set you up to understand trust in a cool way. And that is that you need to understand that the very core makeup of human psychology starts with trust. Now, there's a lot of models out there, but if you are interested, go and Google Erik Erikson and the 8-stage model of human development. And he was kind of the founding father around that. And it's fascinating. Now, I've taken some of this, I'm not going to go through all 8 stages. I'm not allowed to, time-wise. but I want to give you just a taste of that. And we know that when a baby is born, we're talking between 0 and 1, this becomes a vital time for developing, setting you up for life. Now, a baby needs to know that when I cry, mom will respond, and she will, if I cry because I'm hungry, she will come and she will feed me. And when I am cold, I can cry and they will come and take care of me. The baby will die without trust. So trust becomes this vital human part of us that without it, I will die as an infant. And so everything in my first couple of months evolves around trusting. Now, as soon as I trust, it opens me up to go and do something else. And this is super cool. It opens me up to go and try stuff, to play with stuff and to see what I can do with it. Now, I'll give you an example. If you go and visit a friend, not your child, but if you go and visit a friend and you walk in and there's this cute little kid sitting there, so obedient, so, oh my word, is the most obedient child ever. There's something wrong with the kid, all right? I mean, that kid is fearful. That kid didn't grow up in an environment where I feel safe. Unfortunately, Rihanna, that kid that sticks his finger in the power socket and puts dog poop in his mouth and climbs up trees, unfortunately, that is a healthy kid because that kid believes the world is a safe place. I can trust the world. And now I can go and try things. And as soon as I get into trying stuff, I feel I've achieved something. I become creative. I get motivated to try things, and I start mastering things. Now, out of that flows something else called independence. And if I believe I can make things happen, I also believe that I can make decisions. I know now that, hey, if I stick my finger in the power socket, I actually know what it feels like. And now I can choose, is it good or is it not good? And so now I really create a sense of independence, making decisions, and with it comes taking ownership and responsibility. And out of I trust, I master, I feel I can make my own decisions. Now I really start creating a sense of who I am, who Kobus is, the real me. And as soon as I step into that space of I know who I am, we find integrity, transparency. What I say and what I do is the same, it's the truth, this is me. Now, this is very important. Integrity leads to trust because you cannot trust without integrity. If I tell you, I trust that the chair that I'm sitting on will not break, the other way of saying it is say, I believe in the integrity of the chair. And so without integrity, there cannot be trust. If I'm a baby and I cry for my mom that she needs to come and feed me, I depend on the integrity of my mom that she will do that. Now, this is the crazy thing. How many companies, not your companies, other companies, have integrity as a value? Oh, integrity. But then I speak to a cleaner, I say, hey, do you trust the boss? No, he's ripping me off. Like, oh, but then there is no integrity. So you can't have trust without integrity, and without trust in your team, in your company, you will battle with people to really lift their performance, to achieve, to be creative, to feel motivated. And if you don't have that, you will sit with people that are so dependent on the line manager. They can't think for themselves. They can't make decisions. They can't take ownership and responsibility. And if they can't do that, you sit with the company with no integrity, which once again, then there can't be any trust. And so as we go through understanding trust and how vital it is, and we're thinking about a very tough time that we all find ourselves in, and all we hope is, can we get out of this? Can we just get to level 0? And the answer is, we will get to level 0, we will get to level +2. But if you mess up trust now, I think we run a risk to still feel the repercussions many years after that. So if I can give you one thing from my side, one thing, did we charge people for this? We didn't. Okay, then this is for free. One thing for free. Oh man, you can make a donation, by the way. But one thing for free, it would be to absolutely put all your energy and your focus now on getting people to trust. Now, just last thing, tell me, am I over my time? Yeah, 1 minute, I've got 1 minute. So 1 minute, here it comes. Trust is a funny thing because trust, once again, it's conceptual. And so because we try to get people to take concepts and experience it, we often develop these interactive games and stuff. And we have, Rihanna, we have developed a few that is just, it should be banned. It should be banned. But we've developed one around trust, and it's fascinating. I would have a group of people in front of me, and then I will say, I want them to write down a what do you call it? Geheim. A secret. They need to write down a secret. And so now I was, so first I like, really, how big secret? I said, no, it must be a secret. Nobody should know about this. And so eventually, after a lot of fear and trembling, they will write down a secret, and then they will put it, I'll give them an envelope, and they'll put it in an envelope, and I'll ask them to seal it and write the name on the envelope. Now, obviously, you get this very weird vibe in the room, people freaking out. And then I would, without them, I would just walk past and I'll grab all the envelopes and I'll have it with me. And then I will start opening it up in front of the group. And people start crying, they start freaking out. And there's this big thing. And I'm like, why did you guys trust me? To write it down in the first place? You're nuts. And then it's very interesting to see what pops out, because some people will say, because once I was an HR person got me to come and do something at the company. I did this exercise, and the person stood up and said, I don't trust you. Give back my money. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. And I said, but that's not true, because you just spent a lot of money to get me here and to work with your Exco team. So you have to trust me somehow. And so it seems like that we have levels of trust, that you can trust a person with one thing and maybe not so much with the other thing. And so what we like to think about when we think about trust is that there's a continuum. On the one side, you have, I cannot be completely myself with you, and I do not allow you to be completely yourself with me. We are pretending, my friend. We are trying to figure each out and play the game, and there's no trust. Because now I need to think, what are you thinking, so that I can play the game, all right? Typically, some teachers, principals from other countries might, on a weekend, have a lekker party going on and some brandewijn and coke and everything. But on Monday, they stand in the hallway with the blazer on, and they're prim and proper. Because I can't be myself with the kids. What would they think? And the poor teenager needs to walk on a certain side of the passage with his blazer clothes, with his suitcase in the right hand or whatever. And they can't be themselves. There's no trust that I can be myself around you. On the other side, there is this idea that I can be completely myself with you, and I can allow you to be completely yourself with me. And that's a bit of a continuum. Maybe some of us will reach that after 80 years of being married. Like, okay, you can be yourself now. And so we find that trust maybe falls between that. However, the closer we get to the top, the harder it is to get our people together, especially in difficult times. And so the one thing that we would encourage people all the time is, can you just really start shifting a focus, especially in times like this, towards trusting people? Now, trust is conceptual. It's something that we feel, something at the core. And so our biggest challenge is how do we make it tangible and practical? And I think, Rhiannon, that's why I'm so excited to have you. And now I'm going to give you the mic now. And I'm going to even move out of the screen. I don't even want you guys to see me in this. I'll just sit over there. Because Rhiannon is a lawyer, but she is a lawyer with a twist. And so she's got the whole law. She's got every letter and dot and title of the law in her mind, I guess, or you probably read up as well. But it's somewhere.
No, it's not all in my mind. Okay, that's for sure. But I know where to find it.
She knows where to find it. She's got that. But then she's got something else that's super special. And she's, how do we get this law thing that's two-dimensional and that sits on a piece of paper to connect with people? And in that process, build a sense of trust. And I think in the time that we are now, in a time where we are going to feel the repercussions of how we handle things now, only in 5 years' time. I think this is so vital and so special for us to have here. So you can continue with your resume. That's all that I got written down on my arm. So my arm wasn't big enough. I'm giving you the mic, and thanks for sharing.
Great, cool. Thanks, Robin.
Can I share your screen, or do you first want to talk? Or what can I do?
Let me talk.
Okay, cool.
And then I'll start sharing my screen.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me here today. And I just have to be completely trusting of you and tell you that now that I'm sitting in front of a camera and I know I'm not supposed to be touching my face, it is itching like anything. So I'm just going to do this. And then
I can take a pencil and just scratch on the side if you want to.
I promise I won't touch it anymore. But I'm really grateful for what you said about trust, because it feeds in so beautifully to what I want to share with you today, which is around taking a concept, a legal concept of something called a contract, and actually making it experiential, and yeah, building trust using this contractual process. So before I start, I want you to open up your chat boxes, and I want you to think about, when I say a legal contract, what comes to mind? What images what do you picture when you think of a contract, or what feeling do you have when you think of a contract? Maybe you could just write a couple of words, maybe someone would write boring. That's something that comes up quite a lot. Legalese, those, or whatever you can think of. It would just be nice to see a few words from people on the group. Okay, they're coming up there. I'm a bit short-sighted, so I'm going to lean forward so I can see what they say. Okay, we've got, yeah, the binding, the wad of paper that no one wants to read, a long document, scary, jargon that often confuses one, complex, les legalese, suspicious. Okay, so that's great. All those, and those are generally the words that I see. Okay, so now I want to share my screen. Thanks. Very complicated. I get defensive. Yes, I must be, as most of the lawyers I know, the very few of us actually read through those terms and conditions that we click on a website. A few of my colleagues do. I will be honest with you that I generally don't, because they're so boring. And it's just, you have to proceed anyway. So how are you going to go to the next page if you don't click, I accept these terms and conditions? And that is how people relate to contracts. And if you picture something, this is kind of what you picture: a long black and white document with lots of words that, employer, period of employment, business relationship, employee, all these things, but that don't really say that much. And you're really only interested in certain parts of the contract. But when you sign it, you are deemed to have read and understood the whole of that contract. And that's the thing that then provides the guidelines for the relationship that you have with the person. Because what a contract is, it's a way of embodying a relationship between a company and its employee, or two individuals, or people wanting to start a business. Whatever it is, embodies the relationship. But actually, people don't really ever look at the contract until the proverbial shit hits the fan, and then it's like, we need to look at the contract, because what are we going to do? So that shows you that the sort of traditional approach in contracts is this image of the people shaking hands, so we're all in agreement and everything's great, but actually we're holding our baseball bat behind us, because if things don't work out, we're going to make sure that you get punished, or you have to do something, or we can get out of this. But we've always got that adversarial mindset. And the discussions around so often from the interview process, if it's an employment arrangement, or the planning, or whatever kind of discussions, are not often included in the contract. And so you will have this wonderful, relationship that seems to be so aligned, and there's so much hope for this future thing that you're doing together, whatever it may be. And then a contract comes along, and it almost breaks down that trust that's been built, because now you're being shown this document that's very complicated and is a whole lot of things that you don't really feel you understand completely. And as soon as we don't understand, we start to distrust, because using that cycle that Quibus shared, you're losing your mastery, and the integrity is missing, because it doesn't reflect the process that went before. So what if we shifted the focus to something where we've got agreement, and people engaging in the agreement openly and wanting to be relational? So we want to be in a relationship together, and we want to be clear about what that relationship is about, and how we're going to flourish in this relationship, not focusing on what we're going to do if you do something wrong, rather how are we going to flourish and grow and make this a successful relationship. And so as everyone knows, a strong relationship is built on trust. And so what is trust? Trust is that picture. It's a child jumping into somebody's arms, expecting that they will catch them. And it's the same. It's when you enter into a relationship, contractual relationship with someone, you go in, you know, fully positive about this thing that you want to do together, expecting them to do what they said they would do, and then something changes, and then you start to lose trust in the process. And often that happens when the contract is presented, because there's no integrity, there's no congruency with what's gone before. And so what trust gives us in our relationships and in our lives is a sense of safety, sense of predictability, reliability, and knowing what will happen. Contracts generally, ordinary contracts, don't always do that. And one of the reasons, and it came up in the comments that people said, is that they're not written for the users of the contract. Contracts are written for lawyers. We love contracts and all those legal terms, because we've been at university to learn that whole language, which is another language. And we can throw in some Latin because that makes us sound very clever. And nobody else understands it anyway. So when they try and read it, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to go and see a lawyer because I don't know what this says. So imagine a contract that the parties wrote, and when they read it, they actually understand what it says because it's all in plain English. And anyone can understand it who is able to understand basic concepts in English. Doesn't mean it's simple. It doesn't mean it's written in baby language. It's just written in ordinary plain English and no legalese. And so even just doing that, just writing contracts in plain English can build trust, because people feel that they know what they're getting into. Let me just move on to the next slide. So traditional contracts generally try to predict and control, and they are looking at an unknown future. And yes, the future is unknown. We've just all experienced that. With 2020 came around, I went to a party in January and we were like, this is going to be the best year ever. And last year was terrible. 2020 is the year. And then in March, we realized maybe no, 2020 is not the year. Maybe it'll be 2021, because most people are optimistic and do hope for a better future. But that's the thing about traditional contracts, is they try and predict and control. And one of the things we found with this whole COVID-19, with the coronavirus pandemic, is that the contracts that tried to predict and control actually didn't have solutions for the future that emerged. They weren't fit for purpose. So things needed to happen in companies that we might never have had to do before, or perhaps they had to be done during another kind of time, like when there was a war or a drought or something that had, some massive thing that affected the environment and the society in which we are. And so, a lot of people didn't know what to do when this pandemic arrived. And I know personally of people who just had contracts cancelled. So they got an email from from some governmental organization saying all contracts are hereby cancelled, and we won't be doing any more work with you for the rest of this year. And that is, first of all, you can't unilaterally on your own cancel a contract, but these contracts there was no mention of any other options, like we will try and, when things pass, we'll come back to you and try and sort things out. There was nothing. It was just, that's it. And so, and I said to this, in this one case, well, you could sue on that, you could go to court. And she said, I'm not going to go to court. One, I can't afford to go to court. And secondly, I need their work. So when it comes back, I'll take it. I'll go back and I'll take that work. And again, we've had so many people being retrenched. And generally what happens in a retrenchment is the head of HR will kind of come up with a few options. And then they will work on scenarios secretly, not telling the company that we're going down this route, then meet with management to review them, try and hide the problem for as long as they possibly can. So there's no transparency. We're going to hide this from everybody, but they actually know, because everybody's like, well, the shit hit the fan, something must be going to happen. And then until a decision is ready to be announced, and then everybody is called to that hall and you are told these are your options. So that doesn't make people feel safe. People feel betrayed. So how do we fix this? And there is actually a way to fix this, and it's using a values-based approach. And conscious contracting is founded on a values-based approach and drawing up values-based agreements. So you'll see there are lots of names for the documents that come out of the conscious contracting process. And sometimes there'll be values-based agreements, conscious contracts. There are other names for them. And what they try to do is to sense and respond as the future emerges. So for example, to explain that would be if you were on a boat and you have to travel from point A to point B, and one of your values is speed and efficiency. But you know that ahead there's an area in the ocean where there are often storms, but you need to get as quickly as possible, and that is the most important thing to you. You will sail through that stormy area because your primary value is speed and efficiency. When you have a value maybe of safety, you might go a longer route and avoid the stormy area because safety is really important to you. Or as you go along, if you've got these competing values or your different sets of values, as you go along and you reach the stormy part and you see it's very stormy, then you sense and respond. So is it, do I need to go that way or do I need to go this way? And that's the difference between values-based agreements and traditional contracts. But I want to tell you a little bit more now practically. So to move from the sort of concept that I've been telling you about to the experience, like how do you actually do this in real terms? Oh, and just before I move on to that, I just wanted to share a story about a self-managing company. So that was interesting that you spoke about your course, because this company has been using self-management for many, many years. It's a French company called Favi, and they make parts for motor vehicles. And they had a similar experience to many companies now with the pandemic, was that during the Gulf War, which again then changed everything for everyone, people stopped buying cars. So the car sales went down, and it's happened again now. If you look at car sales in South Africa, they've dropped dramatically. And many people are buying used, the City Golf, I think, is one of the highest, sort of most popular cars at the moment in South Africa, because people are rather spending less and buying an old car. So at this company, they had too many employees at the time because they didn't need all these people making all these parts for the car. So what they could have done was retrenched them. But instead, the director or the CEO, it was a self-managing company, but there was a sort of leader person, and he came and he stood on a soapbox in the middle of the factory and got everyone to stop working for a little while and said, this is where we are. We don't have enough money to pay everyone because we're not selling as many parts as possible. I want you to come up with ways that we could save the company and save people's jobs, because otherwise some of you are going to have to leave, and the people who are going to have to leave are the temporary employees. But the temporary employees at this company were some people who had been there for a few years already because of various legislation in France. And so after some suggestions, one person said, well, why don't we all just work for 3 weeks every month instead of 4? And in that sentence, they had saved 25% of their revenue, because the money that was, people took basically a week off each month and they were paid 75% of their salary. And that saved the company at that time. And that solution might not have come from HR or from someone who was disconnected to the actual employees. And so that's this thing of like you, and the values of the company were that everybody matters and we want everybody to be okay. So everybody was prepared to make a sacrifice to save the few that might have to leave. And I know a lot of companies have done that at the moment. People have taken cuts and had less income. But it's been interesting to see the difference in, so some companies where directors have taken a 50% salary cut, and then they're suddenly having a payout of dividends. So, the transparency is a huge thing, because on paper it might look like the director's now taking a 50% salary cut, but actually he's just received R1 million of dividends that was due to him or her. So, okay, let's look at some practical things. So the thing about conscious contracting is that it offers a systemic approach. So it's the pieces of the puzzle. Like, how do you put together something that can build trust in your contractual arrangements? And it's a process that you follow, and it's a system. It's creating a system. And on a macro level, it's about systems change, actually, a whole new approach to business. So what I want to show you is a little video about trust from Brené Brown. Let's see if I can get it to play.
Yeah.
There, yeah. How's it going? It's very short, and it's a change from my voice droning on.
It's not playing.
There we go. But there's no sound. We're just working on the sound. Can you hear? No, in the chat box.
I know, right? I've got an idea. I'm going to unplug this quickly.
Okay.
Don't worry. Let's see.
One day, my daughter, Ellen, came home from school. She was in 3rd grade. And the minute we closed the front door, she literally just started sobbing and slid down the door until she was just kind of a heap of crying on the floor. And of course, it scared me. And I said, "What's wrong, Ellen? What happened? What happened?" And she pulled herself together enough to say, something really hard happened to me today at school. And I shared it with a couple of my friends during recess. And by the time we got back into the classroom, everyone in my class knew what had happened. And they were laughing and pointing at me and calling me names. And it was so bad, and the kids were being so disruptive, that her teacher even had to take marbles out of this marble jar. And the marble jar in the classroom is a jar where if the kids are making great choices together, the teacher adds marbles. If they're making not great choices, the teacher takes out marbles. And if the jar gets filled up, there's a celebration for the class. And so she said, it was one of the worst moments of my life. They were laughing and pointing, and Miss Balkan, my teacher, kept saying, "I'm going to take marbles out," and she didn't know what was happening. And she looked at me, and she just with this face that is just seared into my mind and said, "I will never trust anyone again." And my first reaction, to be really honest with you, was damn straight. You don't tell anybody anything but your mama. Yeah, right? That's it. I mean, that was my like, you just tell me. And when you grow up and you go off to school, mama will go too. I'll get a little apartment. And the other thing I was thinking, to be quite honest with you, is I will find out who those kids were. And while I'm not going to beat up a 9-year-old, I know their mamas. That's the place you go to. And I'm like, how am I going to explain trust to this 3rd grader in front of me? So I took a deep breath and I said, "Ellen, trust is like a marble jar." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You share those hard stories and those hard things that are happening to you with friends who over time you filled up their marble jar. They've done thing after thing after thing where you're like, I know I can share this with this person. Does that make sense?" That's what Ellen said. Yes, that makes sense. Hi,
Let's go on
YouTubers.
to the next one.
Okay.
Great. So basically conscious contracting is a bit like the jar and the marbles, because it's got the structure and the process to build trust. And it just links in also with what Quibus had to say about trust being on a continuum. So, I think depending on where we are, we have our little marble jar, and then these things happen where marbles come in and marbles go out. But often when we're dealing with legal documents and legal contractual relationships, um, there are more marbles going out than going in. So how do we fill that jar? And the way that we do this practically, I think, did you say to click on there?
Let's see if we can get that going.
I'm just clicking onto the next slide. There we go. Is one of the ways that you can do this. How do you build trust into contracts? Is by talking about values. And when you talk about values, it's because you're talking about what matters to you, who you are, why you do what you do, what's important. And that's a two-way conversation between, we talked about company values, and they're on the wall. But when I talk about responsibility, what I think about responsibility might be very different to what another person thinks about responsibility. So we really do need to sort of examine these values and talk about them and what they mean to us. But what is so wonderful about values is that we all have them. Some of us aren't that conscious of what our values are, but they influence every single decision we make. And they will influence the decision about who you work for, which company you work for. So, for example, someone who has a very, very strong value of environmental awareness will not work for a mining company. It just, incongruent. And if they thought that the mining company's values were integrity and loyalty and blah, 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 and they went off there and thought, okay, I can deal with those, there wouldn't be a fit, because that's actually a very relevant value to consider for them. So I think that's, so what talking about values, and when people talk about their values, they become very authentic, because they're talking about what matters to them and what's important to them. And that's where we see this honesty and then the building of trust, because we're building connection and we're being real people who care about real things. And so that is one of the ways, anyway, that you build connection. And values-based agreements, in the name, or conscious contracting, uses values as a starting point for examining what is it, who are we, what are we going to do together, and how are we going to do it according to our values. And often, it's very early on, if there is a big disconnect between the values of the parties, rather know that at the beginning than 6 months or 12 months down the line, when you've already put so much of your energy and money and time into a relationship that was never going to go anywhere in the first place if you'd had the discussion at the beginning. And then the other thing that conscious contracting uses is this concept of a touchstone. So the touchstone concept is, this is the litmus test or the acid test by which all decisions are tested. So does whatever we're going to do meet the mission, the vision, and the values and the principles? So it's used as a way of aligning all future decisions, and that builds integrity. And as we saw from Quibus's cycle, integrity builds trust. So the touchstone part of the conscious contract is working out what the mission is of the parties, what the vision is, what their values are, what their non-negotiable principles might be, and then it's looking at clear commitments from all parties. So not just from one side, a commitment from both sides. Who are you? Why are you doing this thing together? Lots of people don't even look at that. Like, why are we actually doing this? What is the purpose of this? Not what are we going to do when things go wrong. Rather, what are we doing now that is important to us, and how are we going to make this work? And why are you doing this with this particular person or company? And that's a really important question to be answered as well. And the main thing there is that people are looking, you want to find alignment. So, for example, the work, so my sitting in this room with Querbis and Tammy is because we've sat and had a conversation about what we think about the world and how we want the future to be and what our impact will be on that and what we think is important. And when we had that conversation, we were aligned on our values and what's important to us. And so that made us think, okay, well, we would like to do something together. And that's how you get to building relationship and building connection and building trust. And then the other thing that a conscious contracting process uses that the traditional contract doesn't have or doesn't use in its process is this idea of a thing called an ACED, which stands for Addressing Change and Engaging Disagreement. And it does go by other names. In fact, you can call it whatever you like. So you could call it your conflict management provision if you want to sound sort of very formal, or you could call it your peace pact if you want to sound like a bit of a hippie, or a harmony clause, or what we're going to do when the shit hits the fan. Whatever you want to call it, it doesn't have to have a particular name, but the idea and the process, it follows a particular structure and a process. And so these are the conflict resolution provisions, and they are always aligned with the touchstone. So they look at the value. So if we have a value of fairness, for example, then when there's a conflict, we'll make sure that anyone who is impacted by the conflict comes to the party to talk about the discussion. Or where there's a change, anyone who's impacted by the change. So back to the retrenchment. So in the retrenchment example, the people who are impacted the most by retrenchment are the employees. But they're not part of the initial discussions that HR has with management and directors. It's just presented to them rather than it being this thing that's done right from the start with those who are impacted. There's a broad range of options that's tailored to the users and not to the courts. So in a traditional contract, your only real options for addressing change and engaging disagreement are a breach clause, where you put the person to terms and you say, if you don't fix that, I am going to do X. And normally it's, I'm either going to cancel or I'm going to take you to court. Well, there are lots of other ways to resolve changes and disagreements. And it offers a recipe for what to do when you're angry or upset. Because when we're angry or upset, as Querbis will tell you, as a neuroscience specialist expert, is your brain is not functioning at its best. In fact, it can't make good decisions at all. So that's not the time to decide how you're going to resolve the dispute or how you're going to deal with this change. The best time to do that is when you're in a good space and when your brain is functioning using all its wonderful capabilities and capacities. It can be very personal, depending on the type of relationship, or more arm's length, depending on the circumstances. And it can involve lots of, I'll give you some examples in a bit about different things you could do. And it offers the preconditions before invoking the breach clause and heading to court. So it's a sort of stepped up process, or yeah, maybe you can escalate up the process. So generally what happens with a contract is conflict is escalated very quickly by lawyers, if lawyers get involved, with great respect to my colleagues. But we kind of can tend to do that and say, no, but your right is to have this, don't settle for that. When actually, maybe all the person needed was an apology. At law school, they teach us never to apologize because it means you're admitting liability. But sometimes you did something really wrong. And all you need to do is say, a heartfelt apology can go a long, long way. And maybe that's what's needed for the parties to move on. And the ACED allows for that because it creates the conditions that you can have a difficult conversation and where you might just need to say, I'm sorry. So it's a structure and a process for conversations that matter, resolving minor conflicts before they become major. So that's been my experience in almost 20 years now of being a lawyer, is that most conflicts could have been changed or resolved or used as a growth experience if they had been dealt with earlier on, before they became a major thing, and then there's no more goodwill. So it helps you have difficult conversations, when to ask for outside help. So it might not be necessarily, let's go straight to mediation as the next step. It might be just, let's ask one of our trusted advisors, maybe somebody who's from the company but not involved in this particular issue. How can they come and help us? Or do we each need someone to support us? Or how are we going to do this? And it also allows you to know when to move on, because sometimes it's not healthy to stay in that environment. And sometimes you do need to say enough is enough. So I put this wheel of choice on because this is something that, we give to children. And again, using Brené Brown's example of chatting to her child, I think as adults, we can learn a lot from children's ways of dealing with things. And sometimes they're quite simple, but these are not the things that the lawyer will say to you. You could ask for help, you could apologize, say stop, walk away, talk it out, compromise, use an I statement, or go to another activity. But actually, all of those are really helpful in addressing change, and engaging disagreement. So those are the main aspects of conscious contracting that are different from the traditional contracting process, which is discussion of values, meaningful discussion of values using various techniques and exercises, developing the touchstone. What's the vision? What's our vision? What's our mission? What are our principles? And then having a really good process for addressing change and engaging disagreement. And the thing about conscious contracting is that it has a solid underlying design thinking process. And this can be applied to many different situations and types of relationships. So it's dynamic and it's driven by the parties and what their needs are. So conscious contracting, I've done conscious contracting in a end of life situation for founders of a startup, for an employment contract, for all kinds of different relationships. And it's dynamic enough that it can work for all of those. So in employment contracts, you look at what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what needs will this fill, what needs does each party have, what about where they're going to work. These days, some people are preferring to work from home. Others have realized they actually like being at the office because they don't have to become scary mommy and scream at their children every time there's a Zoom call. Because at the office, they don't have that in the background, whereas others really like that because they can just step back and say, oh, sorry, I just need to sort this out and then I'll be back with you. And is it an input kind of job or an output focused kind of job? Do you have to clock in and clock out, or is it really about what you're doing? All those kinds of discussions. And those can be included in the contract. I think that's something I didn't make very clear, but all this stuff is actually built into the contract. And the contract becomes a living document that you can go to whenever you need to clarify things, rather than something that you just signed, put in a drawer, and when it's really bad, you go and look at it and think, oh my God, I can't believe I signed that. And now they can get rid of me in with 1 week's notice or whatever it is. And for co-founders and startups, it's really a useful process, looking at things like what's your relationship to risk. We all have different relationships to risk. Is this a project or a lifetime's work? What's your exit plan? Some people like to do lots of startups and build things, but then after that, they don't want to be part of that anymore. They are, innovators and want things to start, but then they don't like the humdrum of once it's all going. How do others come and join? And looking at what your non-negotiables are. And another thing is that the conscious contracting process, when you're talking about the individuals, you can look at people's styles. So for example, we all have different styles around conflict. Some people are more collaborating, In fact, everybody, we all want to be collaborating because that's supposed to be the best style. I know that I'm particularly compromising, so I never really get what I want, but I get half of what I want, and that's generally will work for me. But being a compromiser, I go in knowing what my bottom line is right from the start, even when it may not have been the best outcome that I could have got. And some people are competing. And so looking at those things, just looking at what are our conflict style and how do we talk to each other in different situations. So what I want to do now, how's the time?
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so this is very quick. I just want to go through looking at some different contracts. So the first two contracts I'll show you are befores and after. This is where someone has had a contract drawn up by a lawyer and been presented with it and said, I'm not signing this. This isn't what we spoke about. And then has come, or this doesn't reflect my company at all. And then has come, both of these are ones that I've done, come to see me and say, Rhiannon, this isn't what I want at all. Can you make it look more like what we had actually discussed? And so this is a before and after. And then I'm going to show you some that are just, there's no before and after, there's just the conscious contract, which has come out of the whole process. So on the one on the left there, you'll see it's very standard looking contract, the first few clauses and then a whole lot of definitions, versus the one on the right, which starts out with some visuals, looking at values and explaining how the company works and what is important at the company and why you are important to the company. This is another one here. This was went from being a 17-page document to a 7-page document. So I took out a whole lot of legalese, all the definitions. There are no definitions in the new contract. It's got a content. So as soon as you know we need to talk about how we're going to separate, you go and look, okay, when we part ways, what are we going to do? Much more engaging and easy to read without all kinds of legal jargon. And then this is a founders agreement that came out of a conscious contracting process. So they agreed on what their purpose, their vision, their mission, their values. They had quite a lot of values. And then they used a thing called even overstatement. So we value action over perfection, health and well-being over results. So that's really important to clarify those kinds of things. And then how the ownership in this startup was going to work. And then this is just to show you that the sky is the limit when it comes to contracts. A contract can look like this. So this is a contract for the Radicals. It's a US group. And they put their purpose, their vision, their mission, and this is their ACED clause, where they have a dialogue and then they have a meeting and it talks about the process. But they've used the colors of their logo and the same font, and they've added color and made it much more accessible. And then this is also a contract. So we're seeing more and more of the use of images in contracts. There's no rule or law or something that says you can't have pictures in contracts. And so this is a financial services agreement. It's advice from a financial advisor. And if you look at the second page, what I really like, there's the explanation of risk. So there's the 3 different types of boating. So there's just fishing placidly on the lake. That's a conservative investor or investment, to a risk-taking investment, which is someone who likes to go down the rapids. And that explains using images. And what's so wonderful about these kinds of contracts, where you have images and words and color, is that it uses both hemispheres of the brain, and we start thinking in a much more holistic and creative way. And then this one, I'm just going to show you a very short video of an employment contract done by a very big engineering company called Oricon. And they use this contract for over 5,000, I think over 7,000 employees, from management and director level down to the person who sweeps, cleans the offices at night when nobody's there. And
employment contracts are confusing, wordy, and written for lawyers? Who reads it all? Who really understands it all? As human-centered designers, we wanted to change all that. We wanted to make the complex simple while being playful with serious intent. we created a succinct and understandable employment contract. Free from legal jargon, these innovative contracts look like comic strip. They are called visual contracts. Visual contracts are an emerging discipline and part of a broader movement to simplify the law. Oricon and staff are represented by characters or avatars. The light bulb avatar represents employees or ideas people. To redesign the contracts, a talented team was assembled from different disciplines: people and culture, innovation, legal, communication, and graphic design. And we partnered with a visual contracting specialist, Professor Camilla Anderson from the University of Western Australia. Concepts and drawings were developed in design workshops. Each iteration was tested and tweaked. More than 5,000 words were eliminated. The result? A succinct, user-friendly, and easy-to-understand employment contract. A new way to engage with employees to build trust. It's an unconventional approach, but one that will set the tone of what an employee can expect when they join Oricon. Developed for all levels of staff, Oricon's visual employment contracts are a world first and part of our focus on reimagining the future of work. A new and innovative approach to simplifying the law, creating the right foundation for positive employment relationships.
So, so I am very lucky at the moment to be working with Camilla Anderson and a South African lawyer named Robert DeRoy, who developed that comic contract that I showed you before for the financial advice one, looking at the impact that these contract has and trying to measure that. And some of the anecdotal evidence has been that since Oricon have been using this contract, they've had far fewer HR sort of disputes and issues to manage, that the onboarding process for staff is much quicker because they can get a lot of the information just from the contract, whereas before they weren't even reading the contract, they were just signing and then someone had to do the training. So so that's a kind of very what are they called, Cook's tour of conscious contracting, and the main sort of parts of it. And you might find that quite overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, how do we suddenly change everything and do this in our company? And what I would suggest to that is to say that you don't have to recreate everything all at once or totally adopt the whole system, but you can start using bits of it. For example, one of the things that we were chatting about earlier was maybe if a company spent some time looking at it, really looking at the values and how they would build values into their agreements, or looking at the ACED and how in the future, now that we've seen that this contract that we have with you, it wasn't really fit for purpose for what we had to go through with this pandemic. And now things are looking better again. So like, how do we get those, can we get those people back? Will they come back? Will they ever trust us again? Will it take 5 years before the people who are still here to feel safe that the next thing that happens, we're not going to retrench them, and do some work around that? So I think you can take there are lots of ways to incorporate this sort of more holistic and systemic approach into corporate culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheesh, that was brilliant for time. I've got a question, but before I do, so that if people need to go, busy lives and you've got meetings to go to, we want to get Johanna back to actually give us some training, proper training that we can really use this and bring it into our companies and our contracting. And so if I can just get that slide going. Without showing the video again, I'm going to come back to this one. Tammy, this is happening on the 1st of October, right? So on the 1st of October, we will have an in-person training workshop because I'm human hungry in Cape Town. Oh man, I will spray you. I will measure your temperature from different sides. It will be super safe, but it will be cool to just have people again somewhere in a room sitting few meters away from each other,
Yeah.
but we'll have you in the room. But for those that can't join, we will also then tune in online, and there will be a whole process. We will send you all the information about this after, as soon as we get this video rendered and send you all the details. We'll make sure to send that to you. And then for those also that want to ask a gazillion questions, we will make sure to also email you our very special HR forum group that we have, where we engage with people around topics, and we will make you part of that group so that if
Great.
people do have a lot of questions, HR, and there's not only HR sitting on the group, we've got some CEOs sitting on the group as well. So if there's any people that want to engage in questions around that, then maybe we've got that group is on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, we will send you an invite to join our group and maybe engage on that. But I do have a question, and then if there are more questions, we'll quickly answer them. If we have
I just
time.
wanted to quickly say
Yeah, please
here.
do.
So Milkwood Law is my website, which is a bit out of date, about 5 years out of date. So it's a work in progress at the moment. But if you look at that, you'll actually see another way of using conscious contracts,
Cool.
because there's some information there. Consciouscontracts.com is the sort of international website about conscious contracts, and Cutting Edge Law also has a lot of information on it about conscious contracting, and that website belongs to an American lawyer named Kim Wright, who is the person who sort of accredited me and trained me in the sort of conscious contracting approach. And yeah, there's some really useful stuff there, and things around conscious capitalism, and also this restructuring around sort of self-management, and all those kinds of things. And then obviously you are life exchange.
the conscious capitalism.
Conscious capitalism, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think those two words could be next to each other. A bit like aeroplane food.
Yeah. So there are resources available. We will send you more. We will make sure that you have all these details after this website, and join us on our forums where we can continue our conversation. From my side, I can say that we have brought in conscious contracting in our company, and it went from, I mean, how many of you know where your contracts are even? I mean, somewhere in a drawer, and it became a living document. Where when I am engaged with an issue or problem, or even not that, I'm excited about something, I get that contract out, look at our core values, what's the vision of the company, what was my vision when I entered this, where am I now? And it just becomes such a living document that I can never go back to the copy and paste. This worked in 1788.
Yeah.
And now let's copy it and paste it because it worked then. I will never be able to go back to that. But that brings me a big question.
That's just one thing I wanted to say, is that this process of contracting that we're currently using, the traditional process, is almost 1,000 years old.
Oh my word.
So it's really not relevant in
Yeah.
many ways to the
No.
society that we have now. And yes, if you look at a contract from 1788 and a contract from now, they look very, very similar.
Oh, wow.
It's quite scary.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
No, but this is my question. I mean, the court looks also at the contract of 1788. And so if I am sitting in HR shoes, probably my biggest question will be will a conscious contract, should it go to the CCMA or land up in court? Will it be a valid contract? Or are we now playing with something that might bite us? I mean, even that question, the thinking is wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's a very valid question, and lots of people have that. So a conscious contract is just as watertight and legally binding as any other contract. If the parties agree and it fulfills the requirements of a contractual relationship, basically, I'm giving you something and you're giving me something. That's all it is. There's no law anywhere that says that a contract has to be in words only. It doesn't say it can't have pictures. It doesn't say it can't have color. It's just that that's how we've always seen them. And so we've always just accepted that that's what a contract looks like. It's a bit like those pictures with the rabbit and the duck. So some people see a rabbit, some people see a duck. But when we all look at a contract, we all see the rabbit. And now there are people saying, hey, but that could be a duck. So and then built into the contract, you can either have your conscious contract with just those parts I told you as one contract, and then the actual payment and what will the salary be, what will the office hours be, all that kind of stuff. But generally we put it all into one agreement. So if anyone would like to see some examples of a conscious employment contract, I have those kinds of things that don't have names in and stuff, and you can see it talks about values and ACED, but also about how much are we going to pay you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think in a South African context where, or let's say in a African or a developing country context where you maybe have less education in certain sectors, you have a lot of seasonal workers. I mean, how awesome it is that I can take you on a contract with pictures that you can actually understand. And now when you make your cross at the bottom, it wasn't like, oh, I need the job, let me just sign and hope nothing goes wrong. It is like, I really know what I'm engaging in. I just think the amount of empowerment that would give a person, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, so there's some videos on that. If under comic contracts, if one looks that up, and Robert DeRoy, he's got some videos of some of the seasonal workers who pick pepper dews, they pick the Clemengold farm uses comic contracts, they pick oranges. These contracts have no words at all, actually. So they're completely image-based and they don't use words. So they completely bridge the language barrier, which is amazing.
We are over time. Can we answer one question? Is there one question? Two questions. Okay, let's quickly get the two questions and then we will say goodbye and buy our self-management course.
Very interesting. So the first one is about banks giving breathers on car repayments during lockdown. Is that an example of value-based agreements, value-based type?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, that is a way of
sorry, but I don't know if you heard the question. Yes. We find that where we often had loans for houses and cars, now the banks come along and say, we're going to be very nice with you and we will maybe give you a bit of a holiday on your payment. We will hit you with the interest later, but we will give you, a bit of a holiday.
Yeah. So I think there's a double-edged sword to those, exactly, because you do have to pay the money back at a later stage. But I think that the thinking was like, let's do something different. Like maybe we don't have to immediately call in all that money. Maybe we can give people a breather. So just that kind of thinking is a step towards a values-based agreement. But actually, in a real values-based agreement, there would have been a consultation with people at the bank. So you would have got an opportunity to fill in a questionnaire online, like, this is what I need. And maybe some people needed a breather, but some people didn't. Some people have made a lot of money during this pandemic as well. So I think with banks, it's quite difficult, although saying that, I know that Camilla Anderson in Australia is currently working with a bank on their contracts to make them visual contracts. Yeah. So,
awesome. Thank you. Tammy, next question.
So the other question was about more off topic in terms of coming back to trust in a family setup. What if you're in a family and you're having trust issues? Can you bring this kind of a process in to help that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'll say yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I've done a conscious contract with my children, actually. So at the moment, but actually I should invoke the ACED because it was about screen time, and we're not following the contract at the moment. But we did a process. Like, my values are that I want them to play outside. I want them to engage with each other. And their values are they want to play Fortnite, they want to be at home, and they want to do it as much as they possibly can. And so we kind of discussed that and drew up a little agreement with pictures, actually, and we drew it together. So I think that it can be used very much in a family environment. And actually, a lot of the thinking that informs conscious contracting comes from restorative justice, which is a process where getting people together who've been affected by something to talk about how that's impacting them and then to find a solution. And that was the other thing I wanted just to say, is that there are so many ways to resolve disputes and to address a deal with change, that contracts only have very few limited ways. But if you go and have a look at all the books that there are about how to you know, get to getting to yes, and you know, having difficult conversations. There's loads of things out there. So yeah, I
Brilliant.
think to use it in
Yeah.
a family
Oh,
environment would be
I've
fabulous.
used it exactly on the screen time thing as well, where I sat with my daughter, she's 11, and also fought my, it's not just, it's a game in a game in a
Yeah.
game, and then you stream that, you know, so that you can get other people to
Yes.
see how you play games.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so we also sat, and I really expressed to her my need is, I want you to enjoy it. I want to, but from my side, I don't want it to become a world. And then she said, but her friends are online. That's where she connects with her friends, and she expressed her needs. And then we said, okay, so how do we then come to some sort of a plan? And the agreement was that she works for her hours on screen, and so she's going to engage with people, do simple things at home, and then out of that she will earn some screen time. And can I just tell you, I have loved this process so much. And her default is, hey guys, I want to spend some time, but I first want to know, what can I do for you? And how can I not make this my world, because I know it's important for you? And then immediately I feel like, just do that and then go and play. You know, my love, that's so beautiful. And I think it was just such a cool process. So absolutely, get a conscious contract with your husband or your wife or something. I think that's the best play. Forget marriage, not forget marriage contracts, but bring that into your marriage contract. What is valuable to you? What is valuable to your husband? This is not something only for companies. I think this is for life. And that's really just a way of thinking that we can bring in. And just maybe to wrap it up from my side, we are in crazy times and we're getting out of the crazy times. But we might still feel some of those things that happened in these crazy times years after. And just from a neuroscience, from a mental kind of understanding how people's thinking work, we are predicting people feeling tired and exhausted and kind of slightly traumatized even during this time, just being on that edge the whole time. And what we do now and how we handle our people now will so benefit us in the future. And to make it tangible and experiential and something that you can touch and see, I really want to encourage you to study more, read more, go to Cutting Edge, go to Milkwood Law, contact us, engage with us about conscious contracting. Because it's such a tangible way to do this, and sign up for the training. I think you will just so benefit to sit in a session and get into more depth as to how do we put this together. And I think,
and it's really fun as well, because
cool.
It's really creative. And,
and I'm going to be part of that. I'm going to do some neuroscience stuff with you, and then Rihanna will just go and really take all of that into conscious contracting. So it will be a fun time, a positive time together. So from my side, that is it. Tell me anything that I'm missing that I need to share, except that go to that link and go and do some of our free training, self-management training. You really want to do that. Tell me anything else? No? She's answering someone on something. Rhiannon, anything else?
No, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, for being here. And I'm just looking forward to spend so much more time with you and changing the world, man. This is changing the world. Have a great afternoon, guys. Bye.